The planet was a hellhole of jagged crystals, all jutting upwards like the universe had a bad case of razor stubble. Captain Veli stood on the bridge of the pinnacle, staring out at the alien world with a look that could sigh or milk. "Hell of a vacation spot," she muttered, glancing at her crew, a motley bunch of misfits who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. "I've been to worse," said Jax, the ship's engineer, who somehow managed to smoke a cigar despite the lack of an atmosphere. "Remember that time on Zog?" "Zog had hot springs," Veles replied dryly, "and didn't try to impale us with giant shards of death." The pinnacle touched down with a groan of metal, as if it too had opinions about their current location. Veles unbuckled and stretched, feeling her spine crack with a sound that echoed her sentiments. "All right, crew, let's figure out why civilizations keep imploding here. Maybe the crystals are just really bad conversationalists," quipped Mira, the ship's pilot, a woman who could fly through a black hole and come out the other side with her hair still perfectly coiffed. The airlock opened, and the crew was greeted by a landscape that looked like a giant had smashed a chandelier and sprinkled it across the ground. Veles led the way, grumbling about hazard pay as she stepped onto the surface. "So, what's the plan, fearless leader?" asked Jax, hefting a tool kit filled with instruments he probably didn't know how to use. "Don't die," Veles answered, "and find out what these things are emitting. Our scans say it's some kind of fluctuating energy, could be harmless, could also be the universe's way of saying stay off my lawn." They trekked through the crystalline forest, each step accompanied by the crunch of shattered glass underfoot. The air was heavy with tension and the kind of silence that made you jump at shadows. "This place gives me the creeps," Mira admitted, her voice low as if afraid to wake the dead. "Or whatever passes for dead on this rock." "Relax," said Veles. "We've got enough firepower to blow up a small moon. I think we can handle a few pointy rocks." As if on cue, the crystals around them began to hum, a low throbbing sound that made Veles' teeth itch. "Okay, that's new," she said, scanning the area with a device that blinked uselessly. "Jax, any ideas?" "I'm an engineer, not a wizard," Jax replied, fiddling with his gadget in a way that screamed, "I have no clue. But if I had to guess, I'd say these things are reacting to us. Either that or they really like my cologne." "Fantastic," Veles sighed. "Let's get some samples and get back to the ship before we turn into space shish kebabs." The crew collected shards of the crystal, each piece singing with a faint, eerie tune. Veles decided not to think too hard about the implications. "Anyone else feel like we're being watched?" Mira asked, her eyes darting between the crystalline spires. "Only by every horror movie trope in existence," Veles replied. They made their way back to the pinnacle, tension hanging in the air like a bad smell. Veles had just about relaxed when the ground started to do its best impression of a drum solo. "What now?" she groaned, gripping onto the nearest steady surface. "Ground shaking," Jax pointed out helpfully. "I noticed," Veles snapped, as the crystals began to glow with a light that was both beautiful and deeply unsettling. "I think it's safe to say these things are alive," Mira said, her voice a mix of awe and terror. The pinnacle's sensors were going wild, readings spiking in a way that suggested they were either all going to die or about to win the universe's worst lottery. "Veles, we've got to get out of here," Jax warned, his usually calm demeanor cracking. "These readings are off the charts and not in a good way." "Fine," Veles agreed, hitting the comms. "Everyone back to the ship, now." They scrambled back, the crystal's hum growing louder, almost like a scream. Veles felt a cold sweat trickle down her spine as she realized they might have just pissed off the local flora, or fauna, or whatever the hell these things were. Once inside, the doors sealed shut with a satisfying thud, though Veles wasn't sure if it was keeping them safe or trapping them in a very shiny coffin. "Take us up, Mira," she ordered, sliding into her chair. "Let's put some space between us and the sparkly death trap." The pinnacle's engines roared to life, and they lifted off just as the ground below erupted in a cacophony of color and sound, the crystals shattering into a million pieces that danced in the air like deadly confetti. Well, that was interesting, Jack said, his voice shaky. Interesting isn't the word I'd use, Veles replied, staring out as the crystal forest rippled like an angry ocean. This place just went to the top of my never visit again list. So, what now? Mira asked, her hands steady on the controls despite the chaos. We report back, Veles said, her mind already spinning with the possible explanations for what they'd seen. And hope someone's got a better idea than poke it with a stick. The pinnacle soared away from the planet, leaving behind a world that was as beautiful as it was terrifying. Veles couldn't shake the feeling that they'd only scratched the surface of whatever was going on down there, and that whatever it wasn't done with them yet. As the ship settled into the safety of space, Veles allowed herself a small moment of relief. It lasted about as long as it took for the main console to start flashing with a new set of warnings. "Oh, what now?" she groaned, rubbing her temples. "If it's another the universe is on fire alert, I'm quitting," Jax muttered, though they all knew he wouldn't. Veles glanced at the readout, her eyes narrowing. "Looks like we've got a message coming through. Priority 1. From command." "Great," Mira said, not bothering to hide her sarcasm. "I love getting yelled at by people who weren't even there." Veles opened the channel and the familiar face of Admiral Keener appeared, looking as stern as ever. "Captain Veles," he began, not bothering with pleasantries. "What the hell is going on out there?" "Good question," Veles replied, crossing her arms. "We landed, poked some crystals, and they tried to kill us. Standard operating procedure, really." Keener didn't look amused. "We need answers, Captain. There's more at stake here than your crew's survival." "Well, that's comforting," Veles said, her tone dry as a desert. "I'll get right on figuring out what the universe wants from us." "Maybe it's just lonely." Keener's image flickered, but his scowl stayed firmly in place. "Get the data analyzed. We'll expect a full report upon your return." "Looking forward to it," Veles replied, cutting the transmission before he could add any more motivational speeches. The bridge was silent, save for the hum of the ship's systems. "So," Jack said, leaning back in his chair with a grin. "Anyone else think this is the worst mission we've ever been on, or is it just me?" "Definitely not just you," Mira agreed, a faint smile on her lips. Veles sighed, staring out at the endless expanse of space. There was a mystery to solve, and it wasn't going to be easy. They had a long way to go before they'd unravel the secrets of the crystal forest, and Veles had a feeling it would get worse before it got better. But if there was one thing humanity excelled at, it was surviving in spite of everything the universe threw their way. "All right," she said, standing up and stretching out the kinks. "Let's get to work. But first I could kill for a cup of coffee." "Only if you're making it," Jax replied with a wink. As Veles moved to the galley, the crew settled back into their routines, the air of camaraderie easing the tension. Despite the danger, despite the uncertainty, they were still here, still fighting. And that was something, even if the universe itself seemed hell-bent on proving otherwise. The Pinnacle drifted through space, its course set, its crew ready to face whatever came next. Somewhere behind them, the crystal forest continued to sing its eerie song, a melody that promised more mysteries, more danger, and perhaps just a hint of madness. The Pinnacle drifted in orbit like a drunk trying to decide if the floor was a better option. Captain Veles peered out at the kaleidoscope of color below, the planet's surface now as familiar as a bad dream. "All right, team," she announced, turning to her crew. "We've got crystals that sing, ground that quakes, and the universe's most aggressive light show. Let's go set up camp." Jax, lounging like a man who was born too tired to care, puffed on his cigar. "Ever wonder why we bother? I mean, what's a bit of alien mystery compared to a good nap?" "Because," Veles replied, her tone a mix of sarcasm and exasperation, "no one pays you to nap, Jax. Otherwise, you'd be a billionaire." Mira, the ever-composed pilot, gave a wry smile. "And here I thought we were just here for the exercise. My bad." With a plan that would make a masochist proud, they geared up and prepared to head back to the surface. Veles ensured that the Pinnacle's auto systems were set to keep them updated on any spontaneous Armageddon scenarios. Jax double-checked his toolkit, which seemed to contain everything except actual solutions, and Mira made sure the shuttle was ready for a quick escape, preferably one that didn't involve them as goo on the windshield. The landing was as smooth as a caffeine-deprived pilot could manage, which was to say, bumpier than a porcupine's back. The airlock hissed open and the crew stepped out, greeted once more by the sparkling hellscape. "Home sweet home," Veles muttered, leading the way toward a section of terrain that seemed less likely to explode. They set up a makeshift base using portable modules, which, given their tendency to fall apart at a stiff breeze, was about as reassuring as a paper umbrella in a monsoon. Jax was busy wrestling with a power generator that seemed intent on its own demise. "Think this thing's gonna last longer than my last relationship?" he asked, fiddling with wires as if they might actually behave. "Considering you're still using it, I'd say yes," Veles shot back, checking their comms. Mira was assessing their surroundings, her eyes scanning the crystalline formations with the wariness of someone expecting them to sprout legs and start dancing. "Anyone else feel like they're watching us?" she asked, keeping her voice low as if the crystals might take offense. "Well, if they are, I hope they enjoy the show," Jax replied, finally managing to coax the generator into a disgruntled hum. "And maybe they'll give us a positive review." With the base camp established, they ventured further into the forest, the crystals looming over them like the worst kind of jury. Veles kept a close eye on the readings from her scanner, though it was about as useful as a chocolate teapot. "These things are still emitting that weird energy," she noted, "and our presence seems to be shaking things up." "Great. So we're the life of the party then," Mira said, her footsteps cautious as they moved deeper into the crystalline maze. "More like party crashers," Jax murmured. "We show up, everything goes to hell." Typical. As they advanced, the terrain shifted subtly. The crystals grew denser, crowding together in a way that suggested either a welcoming committee or a mob. The air was charged, alive with an unseen tension that prickled their skin and set teeth on edge. They encountered their first sign of alien life, or what used to be life, spread out like a cautionary tale. Fragmented remains, skeletal and indistinct, lay scattered amongst the crystals, as if the planet had decided to rearrange its decor. Veles knelt next to the remnants, her expression unreadable. "Looks like the locals didn't fare too well. Or they didn't get the memo that being alive is generally preferred," Jax said, poking at the remains with a tool that looked suspiciously like a spatula. Mira hovered nearby, her face a careful mask of disinterest. "Do you think it's connected to us being here?" Veles stood, brushing dust from her hands. "If they're collapsing like that, maybe we're the universal final straw." "Fantastic," Mira sighed. "We're humanity's greatest export. Unintended consequences." They pressed on, each step feeling like it led them deeper into a trap, though whether the trap was set by the universe or themselves was up for debate. The crystals continued their silent vigil, their hum now a constant companion, reverberating through the air like a warning. "So what's the plan if these things decide they don't like us?" Jax asked, glancing nervously at the crystalline walls closing in. Veles shrugged, the picture of nonchalance. "Run, scream, die, in that order." "Good to know we've got options," Mira muttered, guiding them through a narrow pass. The further they went, the stranger things became. Shadows played tricks, twisting into figures just at the edge of vision. Whispers danced on the air, indistinct and mocking, as if the planet itself was laughing at their audacity. "Anyone else hear that?" Jax asked, his bravado slipping as his eyes darted around. "I hear a lot of things," Veles replied, her voice steady. "None of them good." Mira paused, her gaze fixed on a spot ahead. "There," she said, pointing to where the crystals seemed to pulse with a rhythm all their own. "What the hell is that?" They approached cautiously, Veles taking point. As they drew closer, the pulsing intensified, the crystals seeming to sway and shift, alive with a malevolent energy. The scene before them was like a twisted sculpture park, the remains of aliens caught mid-collapse, frozen in a tableau of despair. "I'm starting to think we're not wanted," Jax quipped, though his voice carried none of his usual levity. Velis knelt, examining the scene more closely. These things didn't just die, she said, her tone grim. They collapsed like their very existence gave up. Suicide by universe, Mira said softly, the words hanging heavy in the air. The strange phenomena intensified the further they ventured, the whispers growing louder, the shadows more insistent. Each step forward felt like pushing against an invisible tide, the planet's resistance palpable. Feels like we're walking through someone's nightmare, Jax observed, his bravado waning. Just another day at the office, Velis replied, though even she wasn't immune to the oppressive atmosphere. As they moved deeper, the air began to shimmer, the landscape warping and twisting in ways that defied logic. The sensation of being watched grew stronger, the weight of unseen eyes pressing down on them with a tangible force. Okay, this is officially weird, Mira announced, her usual calm cracking. Veli stopped, scanning the surroundings with a critical eye. We need answers, she said, but I'm not sure they are the kind we'll like. Jack sighed, his gaze drifting to the crystalline expanse. Wouldn't be the first time the universe gave us the finger. They continued on, driven by a mixture of curiosity and survival instinct, the latter growing stronger with each bizarre encounter. The crystal forest was alive in ways they couldn't comprehend, its alien nature both captivating and terrifying. The whispers became voices, clearer now, though still elusive. Words half-formed, promises, threats, a cacophony of intent that danced on the edge of understanding. It was as if the planet was trying to communicate, its message lost in translation. Do you think they're trying to tell us something? Mira mused, her expression thoughtful despite the tension. Yeah, Jack said, rubbing the back of his neck. I think they're saying, get the hell out. Velis couldn't shake the feeling that they were touching something ancient, something that had seen civilizations rise and fall. The planet's secrets were buried deep, and it wasn't keen on sharing. They reached a clearing, the crystals parting to reveal a central spire, towering and ominous. It pulsed with energy, the ground around it littered with the remains of those who had come before. Looks like ground zero for whatever the hell's going on, Velis said, eyeing the spire warily. Or the world's worst tourist attraction, Jack suggested. As they approached, the air thickened, charged with a presence that was both oppressive and awe-inspiring. The whispers crescendoed, a chorus of voices that seemed to demand something from them, a tribute or a sacrifice, they couldn't tell. Anyone else feeling like we're about to meet the locals? Mira asked, her voice tinged with anticipation and fear. Velis nodded, her gaze fixed on the spire. Let's hope they are in a good mood. They gathered at the base of the spire, the weight of the moment pressing down on them. Whatever happened next, they were in it together for better or worse. All right, Velis said, taking a deep breath. Let's see what the universe has in store for us, shall we? Jack's grin, though it was more grimace than humor. Here's hoping it's a welcome party and not an execution. With that, they stepped closer to the spire, the crystals singing their eerie, otherworldly tune. Whatever awaited them, it would be unlike anything they'd faced before. But one thing was certain, they were in for one hell of a ride. The pinnacle lay in orbit above them, a sentinel in the void, ready to whisk them away at a moment's notice. But for now, solace lay in the heart of the crystal forest, amongst the ghosts of civilizations past, as they prepared to uncover the planet's deadly secret. The crystalline spire throbbed like a giant, alien heartbeat. Veli stared up at it, arms folded like a teacher about to scold a particularly unruly student. You ever get the feeling this is all just a cosmic joke? She said. Yeah, and we're the punchline, Jax replied, his voice laced with that familiar blend of sarcasm and resignation. He poked at the ground with his boot, like it might reveal its secrets if he just annoyed it enough. Mira circled the spire, her eyes narrowing at the intricate carvings etched into its surface. They were patterns, symbols, but the kind that looked like they were designed by a drunk mathematician. These looked like they could be some sort of language. At this point, I'd settle for a cosmic welcome mat, Velis said, stepping closer to examine the markings. But I'm guessing it's more get off my lawn vibes. The spire seemed to mock them with its silence, standing tall and inscrutable. Veli squinted, trying to decipher meaning in what looked like a scene from a fever dream. If this thing is a Rosetta Stone, it's got more hieroglyphics than my last breakup text. They moved around the spire, searching for something, anything, that might translate alien hieroglyphics into human. Jax fumbled with his toolkit, pulling out what looked like a high-tech magnifying glass crossed with an egg whisk. Here's hoping this gizmo can translate ancient alien into sarcasm. The device hummed softly as Jax ran it over the carvings. Lights blinked erratically, like they were trying to piece together the world's most confusing puzzle. It's pulling some data, Jax mumbled, squinting at the screen. Either that or it's ordering lunch. Veles leaned in, peering over his shoulder. Any idea what it's saying? Maybe something about an impending apocalypse, or it's a recipe for disaster. Both seem likely, Jax said with a shrug. The device beeped, spewing a string of data that seemed to make even less sense than the carvings themselves. Mira glanced at the output, a wry smile curling her lips. I think we've found a library and we don't have a card. Their surroundings grew more restless as if the planet was aware of their intrusion. Whispers grew louder, shadows grew longer, and the air took on a charged quality that made their hair stand on end. Veles took a step back, eyes flicking between the spire and her crew. Something tells me we're on someone's naughty list. Yeah, but they're the ones leaving cryptic notes around, Jax grumbled, shoving the device back into his toolkit. They could have just put up a sign, beware of existential dread. The tension in the air was tangible, a living thing pressing against them. The spire loomed, full of secrets and promises of doom, and the ground at its base was littered with ancient artifacts, tools, remnants, the kind of bric-a-brac that gave historians nightmares. Mira picked up a small device, its surface smooth and reflective. "What do you make of this?" she asked, tossing it to Veles. Veles caught it, turning it over in her hands. It was sleek, simple, and utterly baffling. "Looks like an alien fidget spinner," she said, giving it a speculative whirl. "Or maybe it's their version of a stress ball." "Well, considering they are all dead, I'd say it didn't work," Jax remarked, his tone a blend of humor and grim reality. Mira took the device back, studying it with a frown. "There's something about this place," she said, her voice almost lost beneath the rising whispers. "It's like it's all tied together, the artifacts, the collapses, the crystals." "Yeah, like a really screwed-up family reunion," Veles said. "And we're the unwelcome guests." The air shimmered, waves of energy rippling from the spire, distorting the landscape into a surrealist painting. It was a visual metaphor for their mission, confusing, disorienting, and potentially lethal. Jax rubbed his temples, feeling a headache brewing. "Great, now it's like a funhouse, without the fun." Paranoia crept in like an unwanted guest at a party, whispering doubts and fears into their minds. Veles could feel it, the gnawing sensation that something was watching, judging, waiting for them to slip. "Anyone else feel like the walls are closing in?" Jax asked, casting a wary glance around. "Or is that just the existential terror talking?" "Maybe it's both," Veles answered, forcing a smile. "But let's not give the universe the satisfaction." They pressed on, inching closer to understanding, or madness. It was a thin line, and they were balancing precariously on it. The spire seemed to pulse in time with their heartbeats, each throb whispering secrets and lies. "Maybe it's the paradoxes," Veles mused aloud, more to herself than anyone else. "Human logic, our contradictions, our way of thinking, it's like a virus to them." Jax snorted, though it lacked his usual bravado. "So what, we show up, start questioning everything, and their brains short-circuit." "Possible," Mira said, considering the idea. "We're creatures of chaos. Maybe the universe doesn't know how to handle that." "Well," Veles said, "if nothing else, we've always been good at disrupting things." The notion didn't exactly bring comfort, but it was something to hold onto as the world around them twisted and turned. Veles wondered if they were truly the catalyst, the match that lit the fuse, or just another symptom of a dying world. The artifacts scattered about hinted at a once thriving civilization, one that couldn't withstand whatever force had turned it into a cosmic ghost town. If they were the trigger, it was a heavy burden to bear, but one they didn't have much choice in carrying. "Sometimes I think the universe just has it out for us," Veli said, breaking the silence. "Like it's playing a game and we're the pawns." "Yeah, well, I never liked chess anyway," Jax replied, fiddling with the edge of his jacket. Mira held up another artifact, this one more intricate than the last, a series of interlocking rings like the kind kids' toys came in. "Anything to add to our growing collection of alien Rubik's Cubes." "Maybe it's a key," Veli suggested, though her tone was doubtful. "Or a paperweight," Jax interjected. "Given the state of things, I'm betting on paperweight." The tension ratcheted up a notch as they realized the gravity of their situation. They were on a dying world, a place where civilizations crumbled and the echoes of failure were etched into the landscape. Whether they were here to solve the mystery or just witness the end of another chapter was still uncertain. Velis took a deep breath, the air heavy in her lungs. "We push on, find answers, or at least make it out alive." "Optimism," Jax said, his voice dry. "Didn't think I'd hear that today." "Let's just call it stubbornness," Velis corrected. "We might be in over our heads, but we're here now." With a shared nod of grim determination, they continued their exploration, the spire's presence a constant reminder of the weight of the unknown. Each step forward felt like a gamble, a wager with fate that could tip either way. The air shimmered again, the energy crackling around them like static electricity, and for a moment the world seemed to pause, hanging in a delicate balance. Velis felt the planet's heartbeat, felt its secrets whispering on the edge of comprehension, and knew they were closer than ever to uncovering the truth, or perhaps to becoming part of the legend themselves. As they ventured further, the paranoia grew, feeding on their tension, twisting reality into a hall of mirrors. It was the kind of situation that would have driven lesser crews to madness, but Velis and her team were made of sterner stuff, or were just too stubborn to give in. "Feels like if we make it out of this, we deserve a medal, or a vacation," Jax mused, his voice a mix of hope and irony. "Vacation sounds nice," Mira agreed. "Somewhere without singing crystals or existential dread." "Zog's hot springs are sounding better by the minute," Veli said, half joking, half serious. "But first we've got a planet to unravel." The spire loomed ever larger, a silent guardian of secrets and shadows. Whatever lay at its core, they were determined to find it, to understand it, and maybe, just maybe, to survive it. "All right," Veli said, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "Let's see if we can solve this cosmic puzzle before it solves us." With that, they pressed on, hearts pounding, minds racing into the unknown depths of the alien landscape. The planet's secrets beckoned, and they were ready to face them, come what may. The spire stood there like a smug, silent judge, its crystalline face carved with mysteries that mocked the crew of the pinnacle. Velis rubbed her temples, feeling the toll of their fruitless efforts. "All right, let's try this from the top. We've been here for hours and all we've got is a headache." Jax looked up from his device, which currently displayed a series of nonsensical symbols and numbers. "Maybe we just ask nicely," he suggested, only half joking. "I'd rather not find out if please translates to explosion in alien," Velis shot back, her voice laced with exasperation. Mira, examining a set of runes with her usual intensity, glanced up. "What if it's not meant for us to understand? What if it's their version of a do not disturb sign?" "Well, if it is," Jax said, "they could have picked a less cryptic font." They mulled over their options, which at this point seemed as limited as their chances of getting out without a migraine. Meanwhile, the spire loomed, whispering its secrets to the wind and ignoring the humans like a cat ignoring its owner. "All right, let's try a little improvisation," Velis declared, pulling out a communicator. "We'll broadcast a signal, see if we can catch anything on their end." Jax raised an eyebrow. "And if they speak back, then we know it works," Velis replied, hitting a few buttons. The communicator crackled to life, sending a series of frequencies into the ether. For a few moments, nothing happened except the ominous hum of the spire. Then a peculiar sound echoed back, like 1,000 voices speaking at once, or a really disgruntled hive mind. "Okay, that's new," Jack said, adjusting his device to capture the frequencies. "Either we've got their attention or they are ordering takeout." Veli scrutinized the readings. "It's a mix of signals, some of it's bouncing back garbled. It's like trying to make sense of a toddler's drawing." Jax tapped a few more buttons, his brow furrowing. "This thing's supposed to decode alien languages, not babysit them." Mira joined them, eyes on the communicator. "Maybe if we isolate the frequencies, extract whatever isn't static." "Sure," Jax said, rolling his eyes. "Unless the static is the message. Then we're just playing 3D chess with a Rubik's Cube." As they worked, the planet seemed to respond. The crystals around them hummed louder, vibrating with an energy that was as unsettling as it was beautiful. It was like being serenaded by a geological choir with a taste for the dramatic. Velis couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched, the hairs on the back of her neck standing up in that way they did when someone was staring at you from across the bar. "Anyone else feel like we've pissed off the wrong deity?" she asked, trying to keep the atmosphere light. Jack snorted. "If we have, let's hope they are the forgiving type." They continued their attempts to decipher the alien response, unaware that the spire's patience was wearing thin. The crystalline structure began to pulse, each wave of energy stronger than the last, like a heartbeat that was slowly rousing from slumber. Velis," Mira said, her voice tinged with apprehension. "I think we're waking something up." Before Velis could respond, the ground beneath them shivered violently. It wasn't the first time the planet had thrown a tantrum, but this one felt different. It was as if the planet was having a bad day and they were the unfortunate targets of its ire. "Great, now the ground's getting in on the action," Jax muttered, stumbling as he tried to steady himself. Their equipment quivered with the vibrations, signals dancing chaotically across screens. The atmosphere was charged, and not just in the electrical sense. It was like the planet itself had joined the conversation, and it had plenty to say. "The Pinnacle, come in," Velis barked into the communicator, hoping their ship wasn't too caught up in the cosmic storm to respond. The radio crackled, a symphony of interference that made her head pound. "Captain," came the reply, distorted but discernible. "We're experiencing some interference. Might want to wrap up and head back." "Yeah, no kidding," Velis replied. "We're getting more than we bargained for down here." Jack squinted at his device, which was now displaying a kaleidoscope of colors and shapes. "This doesn't look good." "It's like the planet's messing with us on purpose." Velis frowned. "Just keep it together. We'll figure this out. We've handled worse." "Define worse," Jack shot back. "Because right now I'm thinking this tops the list." A sudden burst of static erupted from the communicator, drowning out any further conversation. Velis winced, pulling away as the shrill noise blared in her ears. "That was unpleasant," Mira said, rubbing her ear. "How's the ship?" "Still there," Velis replied, more hopeful than certain. "But we need to wrap this up before it's not." As if sensing their urgency, the spire's pulses increased in frequency, sending out waves that distorted the air and blurred reality like a bad acid trip. The crystals around them sang louder, their harmonies chaotic and dissonant. "Okay," Jack said, "I'm officially done with this planet's musical number." Velis took a deep breath, trying to focus despite the chaos. "Right, we need to get back to the shuttle, try and figure this out from a safe distance." "Safe?" Jax echoed incredulously. "On this planet. I'd settle for less likely to kill us." Mira pocketed the alien fidget spinner, possibly a key, or just a piece of shinier bric-a-brac, and nodded. "Agreed. Let's move before this place decides to swallow us whole." They navigated the unstable terrain, the ground shifting beneath their feet like it was made of sand and spite. The spire loomed behind them, a silent sentinel that seemed almost disappointed to see them go. "Think we'll make it out of here in one piece?" Jax asked, casting a wary glance back. "Only one way to find out," Velis replied, quickening her pace. And if we don't, I'm blaming you. The trek back to the shuttle was an obstacle course of unstable ground and treacherous crystal formations, each step a gamble. Their equipment buzzed with interference, the signals a constant reminder that the planet hadn't had its final say yet. Finally, they reached the shuttle, its familiar shape a welcome sight amidst the chaos. They piled in, Veli's taking the pilot's seat with a sense of relief. The controls responded sluggishly, as if the planet's interference had extended its reach. "Let's get out of here," Mira said, strapping herself in. "Not going to argue with that," Jax muttered, securing his toolkit. With a few deft movements, Velis powered up the engines. The shuttle lurched, the system struggling against the planet's grip, but with a determined shove they broke free, ascending into the sky with a roar of defiance. As they soared through the atmosphere, the spire shrank into the distance, its mysteries unsolved, its secrets unshared. But Velis couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't done with them yet. The planet had taken an interest, and it wasn't the kind that faded quietly into the background. "So," Jax said, leaning back in his seat, "what's next on the agenda, besides not dying?" "Figuring out what the hell we just stirred up," Velis replied, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "And hoping it doesn't follow us home." Mira sighed, exhaustion creeping into her voice. "I could use a break, maybe a nice, relaxing day on Zog." "Agreed," Velis said, though her mind was already racing with possibilities. "But first, we've got some work to do." The shuttle broke through the atmosphere, the stars welcoming them back to the void. The pinnacle loomed ahead, a beacon of safety and sanity in a galaxy that seemed hell-bent on chaos. As they docked and disembarked, Velis couldn't help but feel a twinge of unease. The planet had been too silent, too secretive, and she had a feeling they hadn't seen the last of its strangeness. Back on the ship, the crew gathered around the main console, their expressions a mix of relief and trepidation. The Pinnacle's systems hummed with activity, but the readings were still erratic, the planet's interference lingering like a bad hangover. "So, what now?" Jax asked, leaning against the console. "Now," Velis said, glancing at the screens, "now we try and make sense of what just happened. Find out what that spire was trying to tell us, if it was trying to tell us anything." Mira settled into her chair, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Let's hope it's something useful. Otherwise, we might as well have been talking to rocks. Considering what we've been dealing with, that might not have been much worse," Jax quipped, though his humor was strained. Velis surveyed her crew, their determination a steady light in the dark uncertainty. They were out of the woods for now, but the woods were vast, and they'd only begun to explore their depths. "All right," Velis said, setting her jaw with grim resolve. "Let's get to work. This planet's not going to solve itself." With a shared sense of purpose, they dove back into the data, the mysteries of the spire unfolding beneath their fingers like a puzzle wrapped in an enigma. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, and full of secrets, and they were determined to uncover every last one of them. Velis slouched into her chair, rubbing at the bridge of her nose like she could massage away the headache brewing behind her eyes. The Pinnacle's console blared an unending series of alarms, each more shrill than the last, like a chorus of cosmic banshees. "All right, team," Velis said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "We've successfully poked the bear, and guess what? The bear's pissed." Jax, fiddling with his ever-unreliable device, looked up with a smirk. "I guess bears don't appreciate being prodded by high-tech egg whisks." "The crystal forest," Mira said, gesturing to the monitor displaying the planet's surface. "It's shifting. Did we really mess it up that badly?" "Messed up," Velis chuckled without humor. "We've given it an existential crisis." Below them, the crystal forest writhed and shimmered, the one straight paths now twisted into a labyrinthine chaos that would make a minotaur feel inadequate. It was as if the forest had decided to play a game of cat and mouse, and guess who the mice were? "That's just bloody wonderful," Jax quipped, examining the scanner that was spewing out an unreadable mess of symbols. "I always wanted to experience being a lab rat." "I hope you brought cheese," Mira added dryly, not looking up from her workstation. Because we're fresh out of breadcrumbs. Veli surveyed the screen, watching the forest's crystalline structures morph and shift with almost malicious intent. All right, people. We've got to find a way through this mess before the planet decides it's had enough of us and our charming personalities. Jax fiddled with the device, trying to pick up any pattern in the madness below. These readings, they're like a bad hangover that just won't quit. The planet's reacting to us, but I can't tell if it's trying to communicate or just flipping us off. Maybe both, Mira suggested, finally tearing her eyes away from the console. And I thought Zog's hot springs were bad. At least there we just had to worry about boiling alive. Never thought I'd miss the potential of being turned into soup, Veli said, pushing herself up from the chair. But let's strap in, take a good look, and figure out how to navigate this nightmare. The crew huddled around the main console, eyes flicking between data streams and the shifting landscape below. The Pinnacle's scanners were all but useless, the readings an abstract painting of colors and lines that meant nothing to anyone but the planet itself. "So, Captain," Jack said, his voice laced with mock cheerfulness, "any brilliant plans that don't involve getting us all killed?" Velis glanced at the others, her mind racing. "We're running low on everything, time, patience, and whatever passes for sanity around here. But look," she pointed at the screen, "there's a pattern here, like the planet's got a rhythm to its madness." Mira narrowed her eyes, squinting at the chaotic display. "If there is one, it's buried under a mountain of cosmic garbage. Sounds like my ex," Jax muttered, earning a chuckle from Mira. "Seriously, though," Velis continued, ignoring the banter, "if we can map this pattern, maybe we can find some kind of middle ground. A way through that doesn't involve becoming part of the local Daker." "Middle ground," Mira echoed, raising an eyebrow. "You mean like a ceasefire with a planet that's sentient enough to hate us?" "Why not?" Velis shrugged. "We've made friends with worse." "Can't argue with that," Jax said, turning back to his device with renewed interest. "All right, let's see if we can make sense of this cosmic jigsaw." Hours ticked by, the crew poring over every scrap of data, every blip of interference. The planet below continued its unsettling dance, the crystal forest shifting like a living beast, each movement unpredictable and deliberate. "Velis," Mira said, a hint of excitement creeping into her voice. "I think I found something. Look at these spikes in the data. Every time we transmit a signal, the crystals shift in response." "Like they're listening?" Velis asked, her interest piqued. "Or mocking us," Jax added, though he couldn't hide the curiosity in his eyes. "Either way," Velis said, "it means we're not just shouting into the void. The crystal forest is reacting, and if we can figure out how, maybe we can steer this ship through the maze." "That's a big maybe," Jax pointed out, but he was already engrossed in adjusting his device. Mira tapped a series of commands into her console, overlaying a map of the forest's movements onto the screen. "Look, it's like a wave. Every time we push, it pushes back, only harder." "Great," Velis said, throwing up her hands. "We're in a slap fight with a planet." "At least it's not a thumb war," Mira replied, not missing a beat. "I hear those get nasty." "All right, let's try sending a controlled pulse, see if we can nudge the forest in our favor," Velis suggested. "No harm in asking nicely, right?" "Nicely?" Jax laughed. "We're way past nice. This is survival." Velis keyed in the command, sending a pulse from the ship's communicator. They watched as the forest responded, the crystals shifting just slightly, a ripple in the chaos. "Did it just blink?" Mira asked, incredulous. "Looks like," Jax said, adjusting his readings. "If we can keep this up, maybe we can keep it distracted long enough to navigate through. Or piss it off enough that it eats us whole," Mira mused. "Only one way to find out," Velis said, steeling herself. "All right, let's work our way through this mess, one nudge at a time." The Pinnacle descended cautiously, the crew working in unison to keep the planet at bay. Each pulse sent from the ship was met with a response, the forest shifting in complex patterns of cause and effect. "Remind me again why we thought this was a good idea," Jax grumbled, eyes glued to his screen. "Because we're idiots," Velis replied cheerfully. "And because it's the only way out of here." "Well, at least we're consistent," Mira quipped, guiding the ship through a particularly narrow pass. "I'll give us that." They continued their delicate dance, the ship threading its way through the treacherous maze of crystal and light. The forest seemed to hesitate, unsure whether to fight or flee, its movements increasingly erratic as they progressed. "Almost there," Veli said, her voice tense but steady. "Just a little further." The ship shuddered as another pulse hit, the forest closing in with renewed vigor. Velis gritted her teeth, fingers flying over the controls as she fought to keep them on course. "Come on," she muttered, urging the ship onward. Just a bit more. With a final burst of speed, the pinnacle broke through the forest's grip, the crystals falling away behind them like a bad dream. They soared into the open sky, leaving the labyrinth behind, the spire's fading whispers trailing in their wake. "Well, that was fun," Jack said, leaning back in his chair with a sigh of relief. "Let's never do it again." "No arguments here," Mira agreed, exhaustion etched on her features. Velis let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, her muscles finally relaxing. "I'll second that, but at least we know something now." "Yeah," Jack said, a wry smile playing on his lips. "Planets really don't like being poked, and we're pretty good at poking them," Mira added, a hint of pride in her voice. Velis chuckled, the tension of the past Iors finally giving way to a weary kind of triumph. They were out for now and still in one piece, a testament to their stubbornness more than anything. "All right," she said, clapping her hands together. "Let's get back to the pinnacle, regroup, and try to make sense of all this. We've got data to analyze and mysteries to unravel." "You mean more headaches," Jax corrected, though there was a sparkle in his eyes. "But hey, what's a little brain pain between friends?" "Exactly," Velis said, steering the ship back toward their orbiting home. "We've faced worse, and we'll face worse yet. It's what we do." The ship settled into its course, the planet's strange energies fading into the background for now. They'd survived the crystal forest's wrath, navigated its deadly dance, and emerged on the other side with their spirits intact, battered, sure, but not broken. As they approached the pinnacle, Velis couldn't help but wonder what lay ahead. The galaxy was vast, full of secrets and danger around every corner. But they were explorers, and they wouldn't have it any other way. "All right, crew," Velis said, casting a glance at her comrades. "Let's get to work. There's a universe out there waiting, and it sure as hell isn't going to explore itself." Jax and Mira exchanged weary but determined looks, their resolve undimmed despite the day's trials. Together, they set to the task, ready to unravel the mysteries of the cosmos one adventure at a time. And maybe, just maybe, discover a little something about themselves along the way. The pinnacle hummed with the sort of uneasy quiet that usually meant something spectacularly stupid was about to happen. Velis stood at the center of the mess, her eyes narrowed like a gambler staring down the last card in a high-stakes game. Except here, the stakes involved their lives, and possibly the lingering sanity they fooled themselves into thinking they had left. "All right, team," Velis started, her voice dripping with the kind of enthusiasm that usually accompanied someone trying to sell overpriced insurance. "I've got a plan, and before you ask, no, it doesn't involve us getting killed." "Well, not immediately anyway." Jax leaned back in his chair, eyes half-lidded with the kind of skepticism usually reserved for conspiracy theorists. "Oh, a plan, you say? Color me interested. Is it another one of those get us out alive or more like the why the hell did we get up this morning kind of plans?" Mira, barely glancing up from her console, smirked. "I'm betting on Veli's special number 2. You know, the one where we don't die but kind of wish we had." "Very funny," Velis shot back, though she couldn't entirely suppress a grin. "No, this one's a bit more cerebral. We've been trying to muscle our way through this planet's weird shenanigans, but what if we tried talking to it?" Jax made a sound somewhere between a scoff and a laugh. "You mean like, hey there, Mr. Planet, could you stop trying to kill us? We promise we'll leave a 5-star review." "Exactly," Velis replied, surprising him with her earnestness. "But more than that, we're going to confuse the hell out of it with human paradoxes." Mira raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued despite herself. "Human paradoxes, like 'I always lie' or 'this sentence is false.' You think that'll work? It's worth a shot, Veles shrugged. The planet reacts to signals. If we throw a conceptual wrench in its gears, maybe we can get it to glitch out long enough to figure out a way through. Jax rubbed his chin, pretending to be deep in thought. So, we're going to confuse a planet to death. I love it. It's so stupid it might actually work. But what if it just gets annoyed and squashes us like bugs? Then we'll be the most paradoxically squashed bugs in the galaxy, Mira quipped, already tapping away at her console to prep the necessary communications. Veles chuckled. See, that's the spirit. Besides, what's life without a little risk? You know, aside from longer. Jax snorted. All right, Captain, let's see if we can make a planet throw a tantrum. I'll rig up something with the communicator, maybe toss a few logical fallacies in for good measure. The crew got to work, the cabin filled with the click-clack of keyboards and the soft whir of machinery. The Pinnacle wasn't exactly a bleeding-edge flagship, but it was home, and they knew every quirk and creak of it like the back of their hands. All right, Jax, Veles called over, pausing in her own preparations. Got any gems of wisdom to throw at our crystalline friend? Jax tapped a few commands into his device, his eyes glinting with mischief. How about this one? This statement is false, an oldie but a goodie. Mira rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress a grin. Classic. Might as well slap it with does a set of all sets contain itself while you're at it. Way ahead of you, Jax replied, fingers dancing over the keys. Let's see if we can't throw in a bit of Schrodinger's cat for flavor. A paradox stew, if you will. Veles nodded, satisfied. All right, folks, send the first packet. Let's see what happens when we poke the bear with an existential stick. The communicator hummed to life, sending waves of contradictory information pulsing toward the planet's surface. For a moment, nothing happened, the team holding their breath. Then the monitor's chaotic display began to glitch, the patterns freezing and unfreezing in rapid succession. It's working, Mira whispered, awestruck. Look, it's hesitating. Guess it doesn't know whether to laugh or cry, Jax said with a smirk, leaning in closer to the screen. Veles watched the erratic oscillations of the crystals through the viewport. The planet seemed to pause as if contemplating its next move. The crystalline forest, which had been shifting and morphing like a kaleidoscope on caffeine, slowed its frantic dance. All right, send the next batch, Veles ordered, her voice steady despite the electric thrill of possibility. Let's keep it guessing. The ship shuddered slightly as another wave of paradoxes swept out into the ether. The planet wavered, its crystalline appendages twitching like an indecisive spider caught in its own web. I think we've confused it, Mira said, her tone a mixture of disbelief and triumph. It's like it doesn't know what to do with itself. Join the club, Jax muttered under his breath. Veles couldn't help but laugh, the sound cutting through the tension like a knife. Okay, let's try moving the Pinnacle while it's having its existential crisis. Mira, keep an eye on the patterns. Jax, be ready to send more nonsense if it looks like it's catching on. The Pinnacle edged forward, inching its way through the tangled web of the crystal forest. The ship's engines hummed softly, the usual rattle of their journey muted as though the universe itself was holding its breath. Easy does it, Veles murmured, her eyes fixed on the viewport. Just a little further, the ship slipped through the gaps, the forest shifting lazily around them, each movement almost sluggish as the planet grappled with the conceptual mess they had thrown at it. The tension in the cabin was palpable, everyone on edge, waiting for the next shoe to drop. Veles, Mira said, her voice cutting through the silence. We're almost clear. Just a few more meters and we're out. The captain nodded, her fingers white-knuckled on the controls. All right, everyone, deep breath. As if on cue, the ship lurched forward, breaking from the crystalline clutches with a final push. They burst free of the forest's grip, the open sky welcoming them with a stillness that felt almost anticlimactic. Jax let out a whoop, his relief palpable. We did it. We actually confused a planet into letting us go. Mira was laughing, her usual cool demeanor giving way to genuine amusement. I can't believe that worked. We might not be geniuses, but we're certainly something. Veles allowed herself a moment of satisfaction, a smile tugging at her lips. All right, crew. Let's not think about how insane that was and just enjoy the fact that we're still breathing. But the triumph was short-lived. A klaxon blared from the console, the harsh sound jolting them back to reality. Velis's eyes snapped to the readouts, her heart sinking. "What now?" Jax groaned, already leaning over the monitor. "We just got out of one mess, can't we have a minute of peace?" "Looks like the planet's not done with us yet," Mira said grimly, her fingers flying over the keys to pull up the data. "There's a buildup of energy, big enough to fry us if we're not careful." "Great," Velis muttered, already plotting their next move. "Looks like we've pissed it off more than confused it." Jax snorted. "Well, at least it's consistent." Velis shook her head, the reality sinking in. "All right, change of plan, we need to get out of here fast." Mira, plot a course away from the energy spike. "Jax, keep those paradoxes coming. We need to buy ourselves some time." The crew sprang into action, the ship systems coming to life with a renewed sense of urgency. Velis felt the familiar rush of adrenaline, her mind laser-focused on the task at hand. "Once we're clear, we'll regroup and figure out our next move," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We've come this far, we're not going to let a pissed-off planet be the end of us." Mira nodded, her eyes fixed on the screen. Course plotted. "Let's hope we can outrun this thing." The Pinnacle surged forward, its engines straining against the pull of the planet's gravitational grip. The ship shuddered violently, the crew clinging to their stations as they hurtled through space. "Come on, you bastard," Velis muttered under her breath. "Let us go." The planet's energy pulsed behind them, a looming threat that felt all too real. They could almost feel its anger, the reckless fury of a world that wasn't used to being thwarted. "Keep those paradoxes coming, Jax," Velis urged, her voice sharp. "We need all the help we can get." Jax nodded, his fingers a blur as he fed more contradictory data into the communicator. "I'm on it. Let's see if we can baffle it long enough to make a clean getaway." The tension in the cabin was suffocating, the stakes higher than they had ever been. But somehow, despite the odds stacked against them, they couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. "Almost there," Mira called out, her eyes never leaving the screen. "Just a bit further and we'll be clear." The ship shook violently as they pushed through the last barrier, the planet's energy dissipating behind them like a fading storm. They were free, the oppressive weight of the crystalline world finally lifting. Jax let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "We did it. Holy hell, we actually did it." Mira was grinning, her relief infectious. "I guess we're not dead yet." "That's a win in my book." Velis allowed herself a moment of celebration, a triumphant grin spreading across her face. "All right, folks, let's not get too comfortable. We've still got work to do." The Pinnacle soared through space, the galaxy stretching out before them in all its vast, mysterious glory. They were alive, battered, but unbroken, ready to face whatever the universe threw at them next. Velis leaned back in her chair, a sense of satisfaction settling over her. They'd survived the impossible once again, proving that sometimes the best weapon is a good paradox, or a team crazy enough to try it. "All right, crew," Velis said, her voice filled with renewed determination. "There's a whole universe out there, waiting to be confused. Let's get to it." The crew exchanged determined glances, their resolve as strong as ever. Together, they set their sights on the endless expanse of space, ready to face whatever came next with grit, humor, and a fair bit of insanity. And maybe, just maybe, find a little more adventure along the way. The Pinnacle drifted through space with all the grace of a drunken sailor, which was fitting since the crew felt like they were navigating through a cosmic tavern brawl. The ship's hull carried the scars of previous escapades, and now groaned under the pressure of the recent flight from the crystalline planet. Captain Velis scowled at the control panel as if it had personally insulted her. "Can a girl get a moment's peace?" she muttered, kicking the console lightly, which responded with a sad beep. Velis sighed. "All right, gang, new plan. Let's see if we can keep our shiny friend confused long enough to stop this energy buildup." Jax leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "You want to confuse it more." I thought we were already hurling enough philosophical dilemmas at it to make Descartes roll in his grave. Maybe Descartes would have preferred a quiet afterlife anyway, Mira chimed in, her fingers dancing across the keyboard. Let's up the ante. How about adding a dash of the grandfather paradox to the mix? Veli smirked. Go for it. Let's break its metaphorical brain. And maybe our own while we're at it, who knows? Jack snorted. Figures we'd be using time travel headaches to solve problems in the present. You got a better idea? Veli shot back, a challenge in her voice. Nope, just here to heckle, Jax replied, already turning back to his device. Mira flipped a few switches, her screen lighting up like a malfunctioning Christmas tree. Okay, sending the paradox package. Here's hoping it doesn't just laugh in binary. The communicator thrummed to life once again, broadcasting their latest volley of logical absurdities into the ether. The ship trembled slightly, as if reacting to the cognitive dissonance being unleashed upon the universe. It's like we're trying to make the universe's worst joke, Jax said, shaking his head. Hey, if it works, I'll take it, Velis replied, her eyes fixed on the readouts. We just need to keep it distracted long enough to figure out what the hell's going on with this energy spike. The ship's sensors flashed warnings across the screens, a symphony of alarms that would probably drive any sane person mad. But sanity was a luxury the crew hadn't afforded themselves for a long time. Mira tapped a few buttons, pulling up a live feed of the crystal forest. It still pulsed with that unsettling energy, but now it flickered erratically like a malfunctioning neon sign. There's something happening, Mira said, her voice wary. The energy's fluctuating. I think we might be on to something. Velis arched an eyebrow. Well, I'll be damned. Maybe our nonsense is actually doing some good. Or it's just gearing up to explode in our faces, Jax added helpfully. Velis shook her head, grinning despite the circumstances. Always the optimist, Jax. The ship lurched slightly as they caught a signal, an unexpected blip on their radar. Mira's eyes widened. Guys, are you seeing this? We've got a transmission coming through. It's coherent. Velis leaned over to get a better look. Coherent? From the planet? Looks like it, Mira confirmed, adjusting the settings to clear up the signal. It's like the paradoxes snapped it out of whatever trance it was in. Or it's gearing up for a cosmic complaint letter, Jax quipped. Velis ignored him, focusing on the screen. The signal was weak but persistent, a series of clicks and tones that began to form a pattern. I think it's trying to communicate, Mira said, her voice tinged with excitement and disbelief. It's like it's waking up. The crew watched in silence as the signal stabilized. The screen flickered, and then, with a burst of static, the image of an alien appeared. Its form was translucent, much like the crystals they had been contending with, its body composed of shifting facets that reflected the light in a kaleidoscope of colors. Well, hello there, Velis said, leaning forward. Nice of you to join us. The alien's face, or what they assumed was a face, shifted. It emitted a series of tones and clicks, a language composed of sounds that danced like music. All right, Mira, see if you can translate that, Velis instructed, her eyes never leaving the screen. Mira nodded, adjusting the ship's translator to match the alien's frequency. The device hummed and whirred, struggling to make sense of the alien symphony. Slowly, words began to form on the screen, albeit fragmented and disjointed. Energy, anomaly, collapse. Mira read aloud, trying to piece together the message. Control lost help, Velis frowned. Guess they are in as much of a pickle as we are. No kidding, Jax muttered. Looks like they're asking for help from us. The irony. Who'd have thought we'd be the ones to save the day, Velis said dryly. Okay, let's see if we can get more out of them. Ask them what caused all this. Mira nodded, typing out a response. The alien paused, its crystalline form shimmering as if pondering their question. Then it responded, the tones more urgent this time. Paradox, interference, harmony, disruption, Mira translated, her brow furrowing. They're saying the paradoxes are causing an imbalance, Jack snorted. Well, that's just perfect. Our brilliant plan is backfiring. Velis rubbed her temples, trying to think. All right. We need to fix this before things get worse. Ask them how we can restore balance without everything going kaboom. Mira relayed the question, the alien's form flickering more rapidly now, as if struggling to maintain its cohesion. The response was slower this time, as if the weight of the answer needed to be carefully considered. Synchronize frequency, resonance stabilize, Mira translated, her voice tinged with urgency. Synchronize? How are we supposed to do that? Jax asked, throwing his hands up. Maybe by matching their energy pattern with our signals, Mira suggested, her mind racing. If we can find the right frequency, we might be able to calm the storm we started. Great, just another day in the life of cosmic troubleshooters, Veli said, her tone laced with sarcasm. Let's get to it then. The crew worked with feverish intensity, adjusting the ship systems to match the alien's energy pattern. The alien watched silently, its presence flickering on the screen like a candle in the wind. Almost there, Mira said, her voice tight with concentration. Just need to fine-tune a bit more. The ship systems hummed in response, the vibrations resonating through the hull. Velis held her breath, watching the alien's form for any sign of change. Then slowly the alien stabilized, its figure becoming clearer and more defined. The ship's readouts showed a decrease in the energy buildup, the threat of catastrophe retreating. We did it, Mira whispered, relief flooding her voice. We actually did it. Jax let out a long sigh. Well, color me surprised. Guess we didn't screw up as bad as we thought. Velis couldn't help but grin. I'll take that as a victory. Good work, team. The alien emitted a series of tones, the translator quickly parsing them into readable text. Gratitude, allies, harmony, restored. Glad we could help, Velis replied, her voice dripping with irony. You know, just another day saving the galaxy from our own mess. The alien's form shimmered one last time before fading from the screen, the connection severed as abruptly as it had appeared. The crew was left in the quiet aftermath, the tension slowly bleeding away. Well, that was something, Jax said, leaning back in his chair with a satisfied sigh. We actually managed to make friends with a planet. Who'd have thought? Velis chuckled, the sound lighter than it had been in days. Not me, that's for sure, but maybe there's hope for us yet. Mira glanced at the screen, the readouts showing a stable environment once more. Looks like our paradox stew wasn't a complete disaster. And we learned a valuable lesson, Jax added. Sometimes the best way to communicate is to break everything first. Velis shook her head, smiling despite herself. All right, crew. Let's get this hunk of junk moving before the universe decides to throw another curveball our way. The Pinnacle hummed to life, its engines purring with renewed vigor. Velis took a moment to savor the calm that had settled over them, a brief respite from the chaos of the stars. Let's get out of here, she said, her voice filled with determination. We've got a universe to explore, and who knows what other kind of trouble we can find. The crew exchanged determined glances, their spirits lifted in the aftermath of their unexpected success. Together, they set course for the unknown, ready to face whatever lay ahead with the same irreverent tenacity that had carried them this far. After all, in a universe as unpredictable as theirs, the one certainty was that there would always be more mysteries to unravel, more challenges to face, and, most importantly, more paradoxes to exploit. As the Pinnacle faded into the vastness of space, its crew couldn't help but wonder what kind of mischief they'd get up to next. But one thing was for certain. Wherever they went, they'd be ready. The Pinnacle sailed through the void with all the grace of a limping space whale, but at least it was a victorious limping space whale. The crew lounged in the common room, each looking as if they'd just fought a war, because they had, in a sense. Battling paradoxes and alien crystal beings was at least as exhausting as any skirmish with pirates or rebels. Well, that was a trip, Jax said, feet propped on the table, an expression of begrudging satisfaction on his face. Who knew we'd spend our day keeping a planet from having an existential crisis? Velis leaned back in her chair, rubbing the bridge of her nose. I mean, I usually just settle for keeping myself from having an existential crisis, but hey, you gotta start somewhere. Mira, giving her console a final tweak, let out a sigh. I actually think we did something good here, like genuinely good, not the accidental kind. Speak for yourself, Jack smirked. I'm sticking with happy accidents. In a way, he was right. With the anomaly now neutralized, their unlikely alliance with the crystalline aliens had proved to be beneficial, if not educational. It wasn't every day you helped an entire alien species untangle the mess of their own making, especially one that involved countless forms of energy, paradoxes, and a potential interstellar tantrum. I don't see why everyone makes such a fuss about first contact, Veli said, looking around the room. Make a few jokes, break a few laws of physics, and voila, lifelong pals. Maybe next time we can just skip the part where we nearly blow ourselves up, Mira suggested dryly, though her eyes sparkled with the thrill of their recent escapade. Where's the fun in that? Jax retorted, grinning. Remember, it's not an adventure unless someone's existentially threatened. Speaking of threats, Veles continued, getting serious for a moment, we should document all this. I doubt the Galactic Council would believe us otherwise. Probably just think we're space happy and had one too many of Jax's mystery cocktails. Hey, those cocktails are a vital part of crew morale, Jax defended, though everyone knew he was responsible for some of the more colorful incidents on board. Right, because nothing boosts morale like being uncertain of your own sobriety, Mira chuckled. Veles pulled out the ship's log, setting it to record mode. All right, let's get this down. Beginning log, stardate whatever we want it to be. The crew of the Pinnacle managed to prevent a planetary-level collapse by engaging in interspecies therapy and philosophical chaos. Sounds about right, Jax commented, leaning in closer. Also note, Captain Veles was, in fact, not the cause of the crisis this time. Noted, Veles said, rolling her eyes. Mira, any technical insights you'd like to add? Mira thought for a moment. Just that apparently when you throw enough paradoxes at an alien entity, it starts thinking it's an overworked bureaucrat. If only someone had told us that during our first contact training. All they ever taught us was to offer a handshake and smile, Veles grumbled. Hardly seems fair. Maybe next time we'll offer them a stiff drink instead, Jack suggested. The ship hummed along, oblivious to their musings. In the aftermath of their trial, the alien's message replayed in Veles's mind. Gratitude, allies, harmony restored. It seemed almost quaint now, the idea that they could help bring harmony to a land so foreign and chaotic. So, what now, Captain? Mira asked, her voice cutting through the silence. Veles looked thoughtful. We help them rebuild, I guess. Whatever it is they do to put their planet back together again. We broke it, we ought to at least lend a hand. Jax winced. Always so responsible. Can't we just send them a fruit basket and call it even? Sorry, Jax, but I think it's gonna take more than a basket of space apples to fix things, Veles replied with a smirk. They spent the next few days assisting the crystalline beings, or at least trying to. It was a bizarre partnership. Humans and what looked like the product of a particularly ambitious stained glass window. The aliens communicated in bursts of sound and light, their actions as incomprehensible as they'd been when the crew first encountered them. Yet somehow, they worked together. This is just like fixing the ship, Mira remarked as she studied the alien structures, only shinier and with a much higher chance of getting zapped. Yeah, I'm still not sure if they are rebuilding or disassembling, Jack said, scratching his head as he watched a crystal entity twist its form into yet another impossible shape. Veles shrugged. Long as it doesn't explode, I'm happy. Eventually, the aliens managed to stabilize their structures, their world slowly returning to its bizarre version of normal. The crew watched, a strange sense of satisfaction settling over them. Maybe they hadn't just survived their latest adventure, maybe they'd actually done some good. Okay, call me crazy, Jack said one evening as they gathered in the common room, but I think we might have learned something here. Veles snorted. That's dangerous talk, Jax. Next you'll be suggesting we take up meditation. Seriously, though, Jax continued, Isn't it weird how powerful just thinking is? I mean, we thought them out of a planetary conundrum. Yeah, and nearly thought them into oblivion in the process, Mira pointed out. Fine line between logic and chaos, as they say, Veles added. But you're right. Sometimes the only weapon you need is a little imagination and a healthy disregard for cosmic sanity. The crew shared a laugh, the kind that came from surviving another day in a universe that seemed intent on testing their limits. They had navigated the thin line between destruction and harmony, all thanks to a heady mix of wit, luck, and a dash of human stubbornness. And to think, Mira said, leaning back with a contented sigh, there are people out there who think space exploration is boring. They haven't met us, Veles grinned. Now, let's see if we can't find a new corner of the galaxy to irritate. As the days passed, the pinnacle drifted away from the planet, leaving the crystalline world to its own devices. The crew resumed their endless journey through the cosmos, ready for whatever absurdity awaited them next. One evening, Veles found herself alone on the bridge, gazing out at the endless expanse of stars. The reflections of their latest escapade were still fresh in her mind, a reminder of the unpredictable nature of their existence. She activated the ship's log once more, contemplating what she'd learned in the face of chaos. In log, stardate, what day is it again? The crew of the Pinnacle has successfully avoided total disaster. Lessons learned. Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor as twisted as our own, and occasionally it's okay to laugh in the face of the absurd. Satisfied, Veles ended the recording. She couldn't help but smile to herself. For all the hardships and lunacy, there was a strange beauty to their lives. They were explorers, problem solvers, and occasionally accidental heroes. In an infinite universe, maybe that was enough. The stars outside twinkled knowingly, as if to say they agreed. Veles took a deep breath, feeling the familiar thrill of the unknown bubbling within her. Whatever awaited them, she knew they would face it with the same irreverence and tenacity that had carried them this far. And as the Pinnacle continued its journey, its crew ready to embrace the chaos of the cosmos, Veles couldn't shake the feeling that their next adventure was just around the corner. With a wry grin, she settled back into the captain's chair, ready for whatever came next. "All right, universe," she murmured to herself. "Let's see what else you've got." The Pinnacle surged forward, a tiny speck in the vast tapestry of space, its crew united in their quest for discovery, irreverence, and maybe, just maybe, a bit of harmony amid the chaos.